Good Catholic Kids, Chapter 1, Karen. In the years just before the Monica Lewinsky trial, the onset of school shootings, and the popularization of the World Wide Web, lived a teenage girl named Karen A. Rogers. She had big boobs, blonde hair, and was a bit of a disaster. She didn't seem like the brightest bulb in the chandelier, although she was far more intelligent and open-minded than anyone gave her credit for. Her problem was that she was different, and she felt that way from as far back as she could remember. She was often accused of daydreaming and not paying attention, but she was always deep in thought. She had a strong feeling inside her that she was being watched. She thought maybe it was God, and that it was probably just the intensity of his power making her afraid. Karen was a spiritual creature. She grew up Catholic and was active in her church youth group, but while she liked some aspects of her religion, like Jesus for instance, she didn't like all the rules and judgment of the church. On the other hand, the idea of going to hell never felt like such a horrible fate to her, since this mortal world seemed quite hellish to begin with. Karen had already been through so much by then. She was only 14 years old and was miles ahead of most of her peers in many ways, yet miles behind them in the ways that counted most to society. That summer, after freshman year of high school, Karen was dating a slightly older boy named Eric who lived in the next town over. He just dropped out of high school and was working part-time at one of the many donut shops in her suburban area just north of Boston. They first met while he was at work one morning because Karen would sometimes come in there and grab a coffee and donut before school. She was badly bullied by her classmates, and some of those bullies were at the donut shop that morning. A jock kid with his freshman football jacket was blowing spitballs at Karen through a straw. Another kid was grabbing his crotch and his saggy pants that were 5 sizes too big, licking his lips and calling her a bitch and a hoe. Eric ran over from behind the counter. He was wearing his donut shop uniform and had a black pointy goatee. He demanded the jock jerks to leave her alone and never come back. Karen thanked him and started up a conversation about the music that was playing. It was the song Tom's Diner by Suzanne Vega. "Wow," Karen said. "This seems ominous, doesn't it? Like it's our song?" "Our ominous song, huh?" Eric smiled, like he knew something she didn't, but he was doing so in a flirtatious, teasing way. "Yep," she smiled back. One thing led to another, and by the summer of 1993, they'd been together almost a year. He was a good guy, but he drank and smoked too much, and he was always hanging out with his band and their few friends, talking about how they were going to make it big. Karen supported them because she was a fan, but she had a feeling they weren't going to take off the way Eric hoped. They had a psychedelic rock sound, and they weren't that bad, but they didn't have a singer. Karen secretly wished they'd asked her to sing for them, even though she knew that was never going to happen. It was probably just as well, because she couldn't sing, dance, or play an instrument to save her life. That didn't diminish her desire to want to be a rock star, however. Eric and Karen were already having some minor relationship problems in July when Karen went on a dance cruise in the Boston Harbor with the Catholic youth groups from all over Massachusetts. She met a young youth group leader there named Paul, who invited Karen to go on a cross-country bus trip to Denver to see the Pope later that summer. The non-stop drama and tension at home made Karen certain that she'd needed to go on that trip and get away. She begged her parents to let her go. Fighting, yelling, and tears were involved, but Karen eventually got permission. The Agape Youth Group was planning to meet at a church in Salem at midnight in mid-August to depart for Denver. Karen woke up late on the day of departure, knowing she might not get much sleep. Her walls were decorated with posters and pin-up photos of Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Nine Inch Nails, Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, Pink Floyd, and other rock stars. She found her concert shirts tie-dyes, flannels, and vintage clothes from Betty's thrift store, all hanging in her closet with no real order or organization. She reached in and grabbed a few things for the trip. Almost everything she picked to wear that was for summer, like t-shirts and shorts, but she grabbed a flannel too because it was the early 90s and grunge fashion went with who she was. She was told to pack lightly, but the things she carried with her every day were part of her. The notebook she wrote poems in, the books she was reading, her Walkman, and of course mixtapes. She couldn't go anywhere without a few security items. She thought about bringing her baby blanket that she slept with every night, but decided against it in case the other kids made fun of her for it. Karen was getting anxious because she was unable to find the flask she hid her liquor in. She'd been drinking almost every day for months, and she felt that she needed it. Her anxiety began to increase when she realized she wouldn't have it to help her calm her nerves, but she decided that she'd use the trip to Denver to get sober once and for all. She'd been struggling with drinking and drugs since she was 12 years old. She tried getting sober once before, in 8th grade, when her grandfather died suddenly, and she felt it was somehow her fault. Mood swings, learning disabilities, and bullies were Karen's other big issues. Eventually, she got into drinking and drugs. She started drinking on the first day of 7th grade. Her parents had a liquor cabinet in the basement and didn't notice Karen was slowly going through all the hard liquor and adding water back to the empty bottles until just a few weeks before the trip to Denver. She was grounded and almost banned from going on the trip, but she stayed in her bedroom and behaved herself, at least as far as her parents knew. She occasionally smoked weed and cigarettes, and she sometimes even popped speed pills from the pharmacy. The speed didn't make her hyper, though. It seemed to calm her down and help her get chores and homework done, but she didn't like the way it felt. It was as if someone in her brain was screaming all of her thoughts whenever she took it. But she'd have taken anything to feel different than she did. She needed a boost of some sort. The only thing stopping her from doing more drugs was that she couldn't easily get her hands on them. Her grandfather was a cop in town, and no one wanted to get drugs for the grandchild of a cop. She didn't know what she was going to take to help her anxiety, and she was starting to unravel while thinking about it. She walked out of her bedroom door in a daze, into the hall of her 3-bedroom house where she lived with her parents and 2 younger brothers. Karen had her own small bedroom, and her brothers shared a larger room, but they were both at a sleepover party with their cousins. Her parents had the biggest bedroom in the house with their own bathroom, where Karen headed. She locked both the bedroom and bathroom doors behind her and turned on the water in the sink to help drown out any noise. Carefully, she opened the medicine cabinet and began to look through all the different bottles. One was marked codeine, and she poured a few in her hand. She stuck them in the pockets of her ripped jean shorts she was wearing. She was petrified of getting caught, but headed down to the kitchen to play it cool. Her parents were watching TV in the room right beside the kitchen, and when she opened the door of the spice rack, her mother asked her what she was doing. "Oh, I was just gonna look at one of your cookbooks. I like the one we made in 2nd grade with all the art in it," she lied. It was true that Karen liked to look at that cookbook for that reason, but that was not what she was doing in the cabinet. She decided to close the cabinet before they interrogated any further, but just as she was shutting it, she eyed what she was looking for, a big bottle of vanilla extract. She quickly grabbed it and stuck it in her pocket, then remembering to grab the cookbook as well, because that was what she lied to say she was doing. She carried the cookbook over to her parents. "You gonna cook us something when you get back from Denver?" Mr. Rogers asked. He was smoking a cigarette and leaning forward in his recliner chair to reach the ashtray on the table. Mrs. Rogers was smoking too, on the couch with another ashtray. There were little blue ashtrays with a few cigarettes in them in every room in the house. The ashtrays all had beer logos on them and were given to Karen's parents by a neighbor who owned a bar. "Maybe," Karen mumbled, answering her dad's question about cooking for them. She didn't like to give her parents too much info. "You getting excited for tonight?" Mrs. Rogers asked in a slight Boston accent. Karen had an accent as a child, but she was embarrassed by it and taught herself to speak without it. "Yeah, mostly," Karen replied. "I'm kind of nervous too, though, since I don't really know anyone going." "Yeah," Mrs. Rogers replied. "You probably should have thought of that first." "I did," Karen pouted. "I'm just saying." "Well, you should be grateful we're even letting you go," Mrs. Rogers went on. "I am," Karen snapped, and then headed back upstairs. When she got back to her room, she sat on the bed and took a sip of the vanilla extract, feeling it burn her throat with the comfort of the hard liquor numbing her emotional pain, and she opened a shoebox to find a pack of cigarettes that were several months old. She took one out, opened her bedroom window, and climbed out on the roof to have a smoke. She zoned out, breathing in the smoke from the stale cigarette, but she hardly noticed it was stale, because she never liked the taste of cigarettes to begin with. She tossed the half-smoked cigarette butt into the neighbor's yard, climbed back inside her room, and quickly ran into the bathroom to wash off the smell of smoke. Then she gargled some mouthwash and spit it into the toilet. When she finished trying to hide the evidence, she called her boyfriend Eric to say goodbye. She told him she was going to miss him while she was gone. The truth was, she needed a break. He was a great guy, but they didn't see eye to eye much anymore. "I'll see you when I get back in a couple weeks," Karen said. "I'm going to see if I can get a ride over to your house the night you get back so I can welcome you home," Eric replied. "I'll be getting home after midnight that night," Karen said. "Yeah, and you're leaving at midnight tonight to see the Pope in Denver. Is there something you're not telling me?" Eric asked. "Like what?" Karen asked, not knowing what he was getting at. "Well, maybe you aren't really going to see the Pope. Maybe you're meeting a new man, or maybe even alien life form and traveling to another planet," Eric said. Karen laughed at the absurdity of the alien life form comment, and because she knew Eric was trying to make her laugh. She was often depressed and serious, and he liked to take away some of the tension. When she looked at the time and saw it was almost 10:30, Karen told Eric she had to finish packing. They said "I love you" 4 or 5 times and then hung up. Karen had a green canvas backpack with brown leather pockets. She put the remainder of the vanilla extract and the few codeine pills she took from her mom in one of the front pockets, then stuffed a bunch of tissue on top to keep them hidden. Karen always carried a plastic rainbow wallet in her back pocket that was decorated with aliens and unicorns. With aliens and unicorns. She found it in the kids section of a Bradley's department store near her house. It had almost $300 in cash in it to pay for food and things she might need on her trip. She filled her backpack with notebooks full of poems and spells, a couple of books to read for fun, tarot cards, a candle, some incense, a rain stick, and a metal hash pipe with a neon leopard print on it. Once she was sure she had everything she needed and peed about 8 times, she headed downstairs to the kitchen, where both her parents were still smoking and watching the news. As soon as they saw her, they turned off the TV and put their cigarettes out. They threw on their sandals, grabbed Karen's suitcase, packed up the car, and headed up the highway to the North Shore, where they arrived at 11:25 p.m., in plenty of time for their midnight takeoff.